Baseball family, welcome to this week's episode of Ball Talk, where we get into a conversation with Jeff Rodimer. He is the co-author of Shadows of Glory, Memorable and Offbeat World Series Stories. And we're excited for you to hear from him right now. Welcome back, baseball family, to this week's episode of Ball Talk. We are super excited to bring you a conversation with Jeff Rodimer. He's the co-author of this terrific book, Shadows of Glory, which we will be getting into. Jeff, quick question. How are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. And again, what could be better than the postseason? So we got games all day yesterday. My eyes are a little bit bleary, but the fun is that we get to do it all over again today.
Did you have to take a halftime halfway through the day? I know I did. I took a quick 20-minute power nap halftime and then got back into it. Did anybody else have to do that?
Well, I just took a break for dinner. Being on the East Coast, I had just enough of a break between the Mets game and then the Padres game. So I kind of flushed out then, relaxed a little bit, recharged, and then stayed up until the end.
Yep, that's what I did. I'm on the East Coast as well. It's exactly how it went for me. All right, baseball family, just like we do with everybody else, we're going to get Jeff caught in a rundown. Jeff, first question for you. What is your quest?
Well, to spread the word about this book and the fact that a lot of people look at the World Series today, and especially younger fans, as sort of this kind of prepackaged, highly polished Madison Avenue type event. And every network's got a panel of experts and analysts just grinding away at every little thing, Turner Broadcasting, ESPN, Fox, the MLB channel. So hardly a thing gets by anybody these days, but it wasn't always that way. And so, we're here to tell the stories that maybe people have forgotten about, or maybe that were a little underreported. In many cases that took place so long ago, all the players are gone and perhaps forgotten. But our quest is very much like your own show. Is like we want to bring people together to talk about stuff that, some readers might say, holy crap, did that actually happen during the World Series? And if we've done that, then for us, our quest has been accomplished.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. I have the hardest hitting question you're going to get today. What is your favorite color?
I thought you were going to ask what's my favorite team, but it is blue. Yankee blue, as it turns out.
Yeah. Don't worry. We're going to get into your favorite team right now, because if the Yankees were a beverage, Jeff, what would they be?
I'd have to say that they're a stout, full-bodied, but it always turns out to taste a little bit different from what it looks. And Yankee fans know what I'm talking about. The Yankees' fortunes really look good until you start peeling back the onion, and then you never know what you're going to get, especially in the last few years in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think an onion
We're
is
on
the
rocky
perfect way to
ground right
describe
now.
it this year too. All right. If baseball was an ice cream flavor, what would it be?
Well, baseball has such a wide appeal. I think it's got to be chocolate. I'd go for one of the niche things like a Ben and Jerry's, but I think baseball's appeal is too broad just to, winnow it down to something like Cherry Garcia. So I'm going to go with chocolate.
Nice. Okay, now I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, is Babe Ruth overly romanticized?
That's a great question. I don't think so, and the reason is because he played so long ago, and there is so much written history, but not necessarily visual or audio history, that you almost can't over romanticize the character that he was. And he was so consequential to the game. There's, beyond the statistics, and we can argue whether it was in a different era and doesn't stand up to, the Barry Bonds numbers or even the Aaron Judge numbers or Ohtani. There's just no comparison, and he stood alone. He just literally stood alone. You can argue all you want about current day versus past day, but in his time, there was just nothing like him.
Fair
True facts.
argument. Like it. And one thing is, I've been telling Brig this too lately, is that like, because that's my question, is because for a long time I felt like he was, but the more and more we see from Otani, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get
Right.
why the sports writers were building him up to be this titan, because they literally had never seen anything like it before. So how else do you describe it? How do you describe an airplane if you've never seen one before? Right? It's a dragon, something,
Yeah.
like.
Track.
So
It's just, in the whole 125 years of the modern game, you can narrow it down to only two guys that have ever done this. And it doesn't matter who you decide is better in your own opinion. There's only two guys that have done it to this level. It's unbelievable what we're seeing.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Every time we have one of our videos that talks about Otani, I don't describe him as a DH pitcher or two-way player. I always put LA Dodgers unicorn Shohei Otani, because I feel like that's what he is.
Well,
It's
I'm
true.
happy. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for baseball that he's made it to an organization that's going to get him to the playoffs. I would have hated to have seen his career go the way of Mike Trout out in California and just not get into the promised land and seeing the prime years of his career spent, with a second division team. It's great for baseball to have this.
100%.
It
We
is.
could. That's well
Absolutely.
said. And Mike Trout is the ideal comparison. Happens to be an adjacent comparison, which is a shame.
That's the thing that's funny, though. You see all those posts like, man, could you imagine if Mike Trout, Shohei Otani, and Albert Pujols were on the same team together? That team would win like 130 games. Imagine.
Yeah, imagine.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. Yeah.
Oh man.
All right. Well, thanks for playing along, Jeff. That's our rundown. So before we get into this book, just a reminder, we have with us Jeff Rodimer. He is the co-author of this book, Shadows of Glory, Memorable and Offbeat World Series Stories. And I feel like that's a perfect description for what it is. Jeff is from New Jersey. He's a lifelong baseball fan. This is his first trip into writing and publishing. Brig and I are kind of headed that direction ourselves. Brig more so along the path than me. But I think that's fantastic. What's your experience been like with your, like you said, your first trip into writing and publishing? What's that been like for you?
Well, it's been gratifying because it came along for me at a time when I was getting ready to retire after a 34-year business career, and I had kind of a gap in my life because I didn't really think it out too well when I retired as to what I was going to do. I had visions of maybe going out and improving my golf game and traveling with my wife, but the next thing you know, it's 8 or 9 months later, and it's getting cold back here in New Jersey, and I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do now? And this whole opportunity with Dave kind of boomeranged around so that when I was really struggling for something to do, it fell right back into my lap for the second time. And working with Dave, who has 6 other books published and had been through this whole cycle of getting books written, getting them marketed and into the hands of publishers, was a real safety net for me. So for me personally, it was nothing but a pleasure to do this. When you're at something that you really love, it doesn't matter how much time you got your head down and you're researching stuff. It doesn't seem like a job. It doesn't seem like work, and it's a learning experience too. Which again, after retirement, you're always, trying to challenge yourself to learn more things to keep your brain active, and to
Yeah.
keep going. So again, it came along at a great time. I'm really fortunate to be doing this with a guy that I went to college with at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania back in the 1970s, if you can believe that. And for this to come full circle and for us to be able to work together on this has just been a pleasure.
Wow.
That's
That's
terrific.
awesome.
So one thing I'm always curious about is, what is the co-authoring like? I mean, these are probably not the baseball questions we want to be asking, but I'm curious what the co-authoring process looks like. Like I imagine, like we talked to Mike Greenberg and Hembo from ESPN because they kind of co-authored books, but Hembo's role was mostly research while Greeny did the writing. Is that how you guys divided and conquered with the workload, or was it all right, this chapter you write that chapter? What did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, it was a mix because Dave originally had asked me if I wanted to co-write, and because I was about ready to retire, I didn't want any obligations or commitments or deadlines or homework assignments, and I said probably not right now. And he had another guy in mind, but you fast forward 9 months, and Dave had written a couple of drafts of the early chapters, and his partner really had kind of ghosted him. So I started working with him on refining some of the early drafts, and then eventually I was doing some light research. And the next thing you know, we're into 2020. I really have nothing to do because now COVID has hit and we're all kind of hunkered down. And so I realized that Dave was probably not going to get this finished because he's a full-time lawyer, unless he had somebody helping him actually do the writing. And that's when I started escalating my participation to the point where we really became co-authors. And so, to your point, there wasn't any kind of a preformed strategy about how this was going to happen. So my involvement sort of morphed over time. But the one thing that I was conscious of was that he had a couple of chapters already in the bank. I was helping him to rework those. And so by the time I started writing my own stuff, I was very conscious of trying to write as much in his style as I could. I've read every book that he's ever written. I know his writing style. And again, I've known him for over 40 years. So it wasn't all that difficult to do. And we were talking almost every day about what we were going to write about, what we thought the storylines were, where we were going to find the research pieces necessary to complete the puzzle for these things. And they're very story driven, character driven. And so we were really kind of on the same page all the way throughout that. We did not write this in silos more than probably once or twice in the whole process. Once I was fully engaged, we were really collaborating on almost everything.
That's amazing. Yeah, collaborative writing is difficult, and trying to match pacing and style and voice and all of those elements that come to, that really come to the reader's attention in a way that is kind of ethereal, kind of magical, right? It's hard to map it out, what the reader's experience is going to be. So trying to project that and get it right on the page is very difficult. But you
Yeah,
guys nail it.
and to your point, I struggled initially with the idea that, well, if I start writing some of this stuff on my own, being a first-time writer, and I stray too far off the reservation and screw this up, I'm not going to help him move the ball at all. In fact, I'm probably going to set him back. So, again, he was very patient with me. He helped me understand a lot about what it takes to get a book published. And if you guys are on that trail now, you know how difficult that can be. I mean, you have to, in our case, we had to get an agent to try to get to a top tier publisher. We were fortunate to come across Tim Hayes, who was instrumental in getting us a book deal with Lions Press. But if it hadn't been for that, we would have been struggling. We were looking at self-publishing at one point. We were looking at going to, I guess, what you would call like a second-tier publisher that maybe didn't have the reach into distribution. So we were committed to the idea that this was a book that should have national appeal. It should have fairly wide appeal, certainly to the baseball community. And so, but first we had to sell the agent. So we had to, we had to kind of retrofit everything to set him up to say, okay, I'll do this with you, and then turn that 90 degrees in a way that publishers could digest it and be open to taking a look at this as a serious book.
Yeah, I've done all of that, and it's incredibly hard. And you're right, there are a number of attractive alternative options that start to look really shiny when things get hard.
There really are. And again, when you got into the area of self-publishing, we spoke to some other authors that had written books that were maybe not picked up by big publishers, and talked about their frustrations. And it kind of reinforced the idea that we would shoot higher because we were not prepared to just do this all by ourselves. If we got in there with a publisher that wasn't going to support us, it really wasn't going to work for us. We got lucky. We had a great editor, a guy by the name of Ken Samuelson, longtime baseball guy. And the staff at Lions has really been supportive in helping us get this thing to the finish line. And I wish you guys as much success as we had, because I know how frustrating it can be when you've done all the work. And the easy part is the writing.
Yeah,
it's the post-writing stuff that really was for us the slowest part.
Which is astonishing because the writing is not easy. It's just not.
No, and again, it helps to be doing something on a subject that you really love, and hopefully that comes through in the book.
Yeah, it really did. One thing I was telling Brig that I felt about this book. So it's broken into stories about different guys. Like one story, in fact, that really resonated with me was Shoe Polish and the Jones Boys, because I saw that title. I was like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of gosh, who was it? I can't remember who it was. It's somebody for the Texas Rangers. His last game in the Kingdom, and he fouled the ball off his foot. And I believe Buck Showalter was the manager of the Rangers at the time. He came out and he was like, "Look at the ball. There's going to be shoe polish on the ball." But oddly enough, there wasn't. You could see in the replay that he clearly fouled the ball off his foot, but the umpires didn't see it, I guess. But yeah, there was no shoe polish on the ball, so they didn't overrule or overturn their ruling. So I was like, "Oh man, that one actually worked. The shoe polish actually worked. It was on the ball."
And in the World
cool.
Series, it happened twice. And again, in the day where there was no instant replay,
Right.
umpires almost never changed their calls.
Right.
And in this case, in the '69 series, when Cleon Jones gets hit with a pitch, Gil Hodges somehow gets a hold of the ball and goes out to see the umpire, and he's got the ball in his hand. And the umpire changed his call, and Cleon Jones takes first. This is in Game 5. Don Clendenin comes up and hits a 2-run homer for the Mets to take the lead, and they go on to clinch the World Series that afternoon. And the fact that it happened about 8 or 9 years before that, actually more than 10, actually, with the Milwaukee Braves and the New York Yankees, to us was just so weird and coincidental that David decided to kind of marry those two events together into one chapter. So you have, two guys by the name of Jones who get hit by a foul ball. And in both cases, the same thing happened. The manager comes out with a ball that has shoe polish on it, and there it is. And the call gets changed, and the fortune of the game changes as well.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's fantastic. Such a good story. I love it. But there's so many of those throughout the entire thing, and it feels like this is where I was going before. It feels like my son has their 5-minute Spider-Man stories that we used to read to him when he was little, and that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like it's broken into these stories. You can read one before bed every night, and you're not worrying about picking up on a storyline or anything. Just get through the chapter, and it's a perfect story for the day, and then you're good. You don't have to worry about the storyline continuing, and he's not going to keep you up till 1 o'clock probably because there's a cliffhanger. It's perfectly formatted in a way that I love it. I thought it was fantastic. Was that kind of the aim for you guys? Is just like, you can have a bathroom reader, you can have a before bed reader, or just like a lunchtime something. Is that kind of the goal with it?
You actually used the same words I did. I called it a bathroom reader, and our agent was like, don't say that. But it is, but it's true. I mean, that's exactly the way the book reads. And the other thing that we did do consciously, although we were aware of the fact that what we were telling was, kind of an almanac of stories, was that at some point we'd have to decide what order do these chapters go in. And so to make sure that somebody couldn't just cherry pick by putting them in chronological order, in which case they might say, those stories at the beginning were so old, I'm not even going to bother reading those. We were going to mix them up based on sub-themes that started to come up during the writing of the book. And in some cases, we realized that it was really off the field events or people like owners and commissioners that were involved that drove the story. So we grouped some of those stories together. In some cases, it was just a player so obscure that we decided that there had to be a grouping of chapters around that. So not only is each story independent of the others, but they're sort of randomized in a way for the reader to go through there and have fun with it in any order that they want.
Yeah, well, you nailed it again. We keep saying that, but that's exactly. It's so different. The writing process is so difficult that what you have in your head and what ends up on the page is often not the same. But it's really cool that you're saying, okay, here's what we wanted to do. Here's what we set out to do. And that's what translates for the reader. So bravo. That's a difficult thing to accomplish. One of the things that one of my favorite stories was the pitcher who went AWOL. As a veteran, I was like, AWOL? I know about AWOL, right? So I jumped over there, and that's the first one I cherry picked. What is your favorite element of this Tom Browning story?
Well, I think what I really liked about it, aside from the fact it involves people that we still know that are still alive, guys like Lou Piniella, unfortunately, Tom Browning has passed away, was that, you're talking about a guy that at one point threw a perfect game in his career. There aren't too many of those. And you can just picture this guy down in the bullpen. He's in uniform. He pitched the day before, so he's dead certain he's not going to pitch in that game. And his wife is going into labor, and he knows it. So he makes a decision on his own to head to the hospital in uniform. And when the game starts looking like it might go into extra innings, Lou Piniella calls down and says, "I think we better get Tom Browning up." And you can imagine the bullpen coach saying, well, Lou, here's the thing. We don't know where he is. And so this is really kind of pre-cell phones, pre-social media. And so he's gone. And so everybody has a pretty good idea of where he's going, because it's well known that his wife might give birth, but they can't really track him down in real time. And so they got a hold of the Cincinnati broadcast team, which was doing a radio broadcast of the game, and said, "We'd like you to put something out over the air to let Tom Browning know that we need him back here." And so the Reds broadcast team, which was sitting in the booth adjacent to the national televised team, which I think was either NBC or Fox at the time, but Tim McCarver was doing the call on TV. He hears the radio guys talking about Tom Browning being missing in action, and they want to try to get him back. And so McCarver picks up the thread and broadcasts over the air for the whole nation to hear that Tom Browning needs to get back to the stadium. And Browning, God bless him, stood his ground, stayed at the hospital, waited till his wife had their baby, and the game, unfortunately for the Reds, did not get impacted by that. They swept the A's in that series, 4 games in a big upset. But I like the fact that he stood his ground and he didn't turn around, even though he knew there were probably people looking for him.
So funny. And it feels like something that happens in high school, because it did happen in my high school team. I remember our coach was standing out on third base, and he wanted to make a pitching change for the next inning. So he calls into the dugout. He's like, "Hey, Adam, go get warm." And everybody kind of looks around like, "You didn't know he quit this morning? He didn't make the bus ride. He's not here." "What do you mean he's not here?" "Yeah, he's gone. He's not on the team anymore. He's done playing baseball." "Okay, so somebody else get warm."
I guess we'll pivot.
Yeah.
But isn't that funny that something that sounds so much like almost like a little league or high school thing can occur in a Major League World Series game? And again, not to beat a dead horse, but the theme of the book was, let's tell stories that will make people think, my God, how did that even happen? It couldn't happen today. Although, I mean, look what happened in 2017. The Astros got caught cheating. It happened right under everybody's nose. They're slamming that trash can lid right in the dugout. You can hear it on TV, and who knew what was going on at the time? So these strange things do continue to happen. But the Tom Browning story is a good one for sure.
So
yeah,
good.
I like that one. And I like that it included Pete Rose. I thought that was, somewhat unfortunately timely at this point. I'm just going to ask this outright. Do you think Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame or not? Where do you sit on that?
I think the Hall of Fame should drop their charade and stop hiding behind Major League Baseball skirts and allow a vote to be taken. So the way that they've jerry-rigged this thing, and they did it specifically because Rose was going to be ineligible, was to kick the can over to Major League Baseball. And so they said, well, if Major League Baseball puts somebody on the ineligible list, then they're not eligible to be voted into the Hall of Fame. So they were able to wash their hands of it without ever having to take a stand. I think they should drop that and say to the writers and to the people that vote on the Hall of Fame, take a vote, let the people decide. If it was a lifetime ban, his life unfortunately has now come to an end. Let's have the vote. Let's give him his day and stop hiding behind Major League Baseball on this. Let the Hall make a decision. And while we're at it, if we're going to talk about the end of a lifetime ban, let's talk about Joe Jackson from the 1919 White Sox, who clearly did not participate in throwing any games, and has his whole legacy basically put on hold for over 70 years now.
Yeah. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. We have the Shoeless Joe Museum here, and his statue is out in front of the minor league ballpark downtown, and super familiar. Yeah.
Let's open it up and let's make let the voters. I mean, the voters have already had their say on the steroid guys. So, if the lifetime ban has now come to an end, and I'm sure there are lawyers out there who want to debate whether a lifetime ban is really a lifetime ban. Let people decide on that. I don't think the two things have to be mutually inclusive. I don't think that you can necessarily be banned from baseball, but also have to be banned from the Hall of Fame. I think you could do both. If you want to still say he's banned, well, I don't know how you're going to ban a guy that's just passed away. But again, that doesn't mean that you can't consider him for the Hall of Fame and let people make up their minds on that.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed. I have two questions. First, I am curious, was there a specific story that got cut that you just loved? Or did everything make it in?
Well, we got to around 12 or 13 stories, and the book is in part kind of the art of knowing what you don't know, because the nature of these stories is that they're either underreported or long forgotten. It took some digging, and we got to a point where we were still looking for stories, which led in part to how we got the Negro League World Series story in there. And that was a conversation. I will answer your question, but that was a conversation with a professor down at Florida State who teaches race relations through the lens of baseball, and Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And so, in talking to him, it started to occur to me that, the Negro League World Series might be a place to look for a story, because the Negro Leagues were not always as organized as their major league counterparts. And, there are stories all over the place about how those leagues were run and how they handle things internally. But I asked him if he knew of anything that might fit the theme of the book, and he said, I don't offhand, but he says, I guarantee if you start looking, you'll find one. And sure enough, within 48 hours, we found the story of the 1942 Negro League World Series. And it starts off by the owners deciding that they want to play each of the 7 games in a different city. And right away, you're thinking, okay, what could go wrong here? And so,
Nothing at all.
after 3 games, the Kansas City Monarchs are up 3-0 against the Homestead Grays, and they're supposed to play Game 4 in Kansas City, but they don't have the rights to the stadium for the game. Yeah. And so they put the World Series on pause, which of course is never happened. That's and right. The teams do what they do. They went out and went barnstorming. So they end up playing each other in a series of exhibition games, and other teams as well, to raise a little money while they're waiting for the World Series to resume. And then the Homestead Grays start losing players. They start wandering off because they're not sure if they're going to play again, and they're not sure if they're going to get paid. And so the owner of the Homestead Grays calls a guy at the Newark Eagles, and he gets 3 of the Newark Eagles onto his team for the remainder of the barnstorming tour. But they're not just any players. They're like the 3 best players on the Newark Eagles team. And then when the World Series does resume, the Homestead Grays now have an entirely different lineup. Yeah. And it's not lost on the owner of Kansas City when he sees these guys come out. He's like, you can't do this. And he protests the game. But he agreed to let the game go because he said, the fans are already here. I'm not going to disappoint the fans. Homestead Grays won. The owners finally got together and said, no, we're not allowing this. You can't bring ringers into this. And so they disallowed the game. And then the Homestead Grays had to finish out the series with their original team as much as they could put together. But to answer your question, we really only debated the inclusion or exclusion of one of our chapters. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. I'll let the readers see if they can figure it out. But we debated whether one of the chapters was in there really fit the theme or not. But we were not too worried. We figured, well, if the publisher wants to take one of the chapters out, that's their prerogative. One of the things that I learned, of course, is that once you sign that contract with the publisher, you have almost no rights to your book. They can take photographs out. They can take sections of the chapters out. They can remove chapters entirely. They can change the title of the book. We were very fortunate. Our publishers didn't do any of that. But we were certainly prepared if the axe came down to part with one of our children. We're just glad that it didn't come to that.
Yeah, absolutely. What we know a lot about those Newark Eagles and the Larry Doby and
Yeah.
the Manleys,
Yeah.
and this is a really terrific piece of baseball history that goes unattended, unreported, and under discussed. It's
Yeah.
really cool that it made it in your book. I love
Yeah.
that.
That's cool. Okay, my last question for you, and I think that we can wrap with this. It's your World Series pick. Who do you have winning it all?
Well, my heart is going with the Yankees, but the Phillies to me are the most balanced team. And as much as there is star power with the Dodgers or even the Padres, if I had to bet money on it, it would be the Phillies. But to see another Phillies Yankee World Series would do me good. To see a Subway Series with the Mets and the Yankees would really be great. I think America can handle that again after 23 years. But we'll see how it plays out. But I would sure like to see the Yankees in it.
Same. I'm worried about their warts. They have some very. If Garrett Cole ever has to pitch a day game in the postseason, you can chalk that up to a loss. It's just they don't play small ball, and their fundamentals are shaky, or they're terrific. Like it's just one day or the other.
Yeah, and these late injuries to Nestor Cortez and Anthony Rizzo did not help them. Rizzo may not be the offensive player he used to be, but defensively, he really runs that infield, and not having him in there, I think, is going to come back to bite him in the butt.
Yeah, I agree. Would you put Cabrera or Ben Rice at first base?
I would put Ben Rice there because he's been playing at first more. As versatile as Cabrera is, I'd rather keep him in a utility role where we can plunk him down or start him and then take him out. He can also play the outfield. He's a more versatile player, so I think I'd start with Ben Rice.
100,000% agree with you. Yep. That's terrific. There's a lot of Yankees fans that want Cabrera starting at first base, and I just think they're crazy. Totally cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on that one. Anyway, so Jeff, thank you. Go ahead.
Who are you guys picking?
Oh, I haven't submitted my picks yet because we do that tomorrow night, actually, on the live. But Brad, who did you pick?
I picked where'd my paper go? Oh, there it is. I have the Padres over the Astros.
Wow. Okay.
It's 6.
Yeah.
Yep. And if I was to say, I think we'll end up with a Yankees Padres series, and then I don't know. I don't know if we end up. I can't. That breaks my heart to even think about. So I keep putting it off. That's the honest truth. Because I watched the Padres last night, thinking Rutrow. Like these guys are the real deal, and they are electric, and they haven't needed to take days off, and I'm worried.
I'd be too. And Michael King was looking exactly like he turned out to be when he was with the Yankees at the end of last season, and now we all know what we gave up. But
oh man,
he's a beast.
Well, and Higashioka, like I maintain that he's one of the best defensive catchers in the league, hands down. Like the guy, and you get an occasional bomb off him like you did last night. Like, come on, man.
Yeah. Like, I'm certainly not ready to give Juan Soto back, but those two guys, they were missed.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's crazy that the Padres don't even have Musgrove going today, and it's like, okay, you're keeping Cease in the chamber still.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it opens up things for a lot of second guessing. And what do you do in case the series goes a third game? And who do you want out there? And that's the fun of this time of year. And this week and next week are really, I think, the best. I mean, not to say that the World Series is anticlimactic, but it's these first couple of weeks when you got all these teams fighting and scrapping, and there's baseball noon, morning, and night. It's just great.
It's the short series.
Pulled in the third inning, and you're like, you're not going to get it done. You got to get out of here. We don't have time for this.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of the short series because of the urgency and the desperation that you see inning to inning with everybody, because it's so much more tense. With the 7-game series, like, okay, like we can lose 1 or 2. Like, not a big deal.
And I don't know if you guys noticed the same thing, but I'm watching the games last night and I'm thinking, these guys are playing with the same passion that you saw in the World Baseball Classic.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
you know, and who doesn't, and if anybody out there has not watched that, the next time it comes around, you have to. You just see an energy level that, again, except for this round and this week maybe, you just don't see it equaled in a major league season. So it's just been incredible.
yeah. We were there this last World Baseball Classic, and it was so much fun. And it's totally different. Totally
Yep.
different.
It really is.
Well, we're going to let you go, Jeff, and we appreciate you coming on the show. Baseball family, stick with us, and we'll get you out of here. But don't forget to pick up Shadows of Glory. This is memorable and offbeat World Series stories. Again, you can read it in bite-sized chunks. You can take it at your leisure. But these are stories you're not going to hear anywhere else. And the research and the quality of writing that went into it is very apparent. It's very clear. It's terrific. So, Jeff, thank you so much. And Baseball family, we'll be right back.
Guys, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Man, this was great, Jeff. No, seriously, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was fantastic.
This is a lot of fun for me personally. I mean, to be able to talk with other, I say baseball guys in air quotes, but not every interview was with people that know baseball like you guys do. So this was a treat.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, who the hell are they have you doing interviews with?
Well, I mean, all over the country. I did one with a small radio station in Kingston, New York this morning. I did one yesterday with a guy out in Cincinnati. And some of these are more general interest stations. And then they'll squeeze the random, again, because it's the World Series, they'll squeeze a story in about a book about the World Series. And not to say that they haven't paid attention or that they've looked through the book, but usually they're not getting deep into it like you guys do, and they're not paying attention to who's pitching in Game 2 for San Diego today. So,
Right.
so this is fun. I mean, I'm a junkie about it, and I try not to nerd out when I'm talking to these guys, but I'm not worried about that here.
No. This is
That's what we're all about.
Yeah. Our last question for you, Jeff: is there anybody you think would that you can think of that would come on and have just as enjoyable a time as you did today that we might be able to reach out to?
Baseball family, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Ball Talk, where we talk to Jeff Rodimer about Shadows of Glory, memorable and offbeat World Series stories. That was a fun book, fun conversation. I'm looking forward to getting more into it. I think, baseball family, you should as well. I think if you love the World Series, if you love offbeat stories, because it's exactly what they are, there are some weird ones in there, then go check it out, because it's fantastic, and I loved talking to Jeff about it. But also, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review everywhere that you can, especially on the YouTube machine. Hit us up on social media. Instagram and TikTok are the best places for that. You'll get daily content from us there. You'll also get daily content from us on YouTube as well. It's just a little bit shorter on those other places because of limitations, but we're always there. Don't forget, you can
really quick. This book is available everywhere, so you go pick
everywhere.
It up.
Love it. Don't forget to you head over to schnookseedery.com, get yourself some sunflower seeds. Always use code BTPod at checkout to save 10% off your order. Support your mouth, support your wallet, and the show all at once. 3 birds, 1 stone over at schnookseedery.com. BT Pod to save 10% on your order. You can also head over to Patreon to support the show, become one of our rooters. We have 5 tiers of support. Go check those out, see what they're all about, see what everybody gets. You can hit the link down in the description. We have links for everything always down in the description, so just hop down there and you can find some other cool stuff, other ways to support the show as well. Baseball family, thank you so much for joining us. We will catch you next week.